Right now, inside your body, there are two organs working around the clock that you almost never think about. They never take a day off. They never ask for anything. And most people won't even notice them until it's far too late. Your kidneys filter nearly 50 gallons of blood every single day. That's not a typo, 50 gallons. And every time you reach for a soda, a cookie, a slice of cake, or anything loaded with added sugar, you are quietly, invisibly forcing those organs to work harder than they were ever designed to. The damage doesn't hurt. There's no alarm, no signal, nothing, and that silence is exactly what makes it so dangerous. But here's the part that stopped me in my tracks when I first came across this research. What happens to your kidneys when you remove sugar from your life for just 30 days is so dramatic, so measurable, and so fast that scientists were genuinely surprised by the results. And the first 72 hours alone will completely change how you think about everything you eat. Let's start with something most people have never been taught. Your kidneys are not just waste processing machines. They are precision instruments. Every single minute, they receive about 20 to 25% of all the blood your heart pumps. They filter that blood with extraordinary accuracy, pulling out toxins, balancing electrolytes, regulating blood pressure, and sending clean blood back into circulation. The microscopic filters inside your kidneys, called nephrons, are so delicate and so precise that even small changes in your diet can alter how they function within days. And sugar, particularly the refined added sugar found in processed foods and sweetened drinks, hits them like a hammer. When you consume sugar, your blood glucose rises rapidly. Your pancreas releases insulin to manage that spike. But here's where the kidneys come in. During that insulin response, your kidneys are simultaneously trying to filter the excess glucose from your bloodstream. Unlike fat or protein, sugar hits the bloodstream almost instantly after consumption. The kidneys have to respond immediately, ramping up their filtration rate to handle the overflow. Scientists call this phenomenon glomerular hyperfiltration, and it sounds almost harmless, even impressive. Your kidneys filtering more blood faster. Surely that's a good thing, right? It is not. Think about it this way. Imagine you have a high-performance sports car engine. It can run at top speed. It was built to do exactly that. But if you force it to run at maximum capacity all day, every day, for months, for years, the engine doesn't last as long as it should. Parts wear down faster. Efficiency drops. And eventually things start to break down in ways that can't be fully repaired. That is exactly what chronic high sugar intake does to your kidneys. It forces them into a state of constant overdrive. And unlike a car engine, you can't just replace the parts. You only get two kidneys. And here is the terrifying reality that most people don't find out until it's far too late. Your kidneys can lose up to 70% of their function before you feel a single symptom, not 10%, not 30%, 70%. By the time most people discover they have a kidney problem, the damage is already severe. The kidneys are among the most forgiving organs in the human body in one sense. They keep working quietly under enormous pressure, and that's also what makes them so vulnerable. Because they never complain until the situation is already critical. Researchers from Harvard Medical School found that people who regularly consume high amounts of added sugar are at a significantly elevated risk of developing chronic kidney disease, even in the absence of diabetes or obesity. This wasn't a small study based on a handful of participants. This was large-scale, long-term data. And what it revealed was sobering. The damage accumulates silently over years, often starting in your 20s or 30s, long before any doctor would think to check your kidney function. Most people associate kidney disease with older age. But the biological process that leads to it often begins decades earlier, driven largely by diet. And sugar is one of the primary culprits. So what actually happens on a biological level when you make the decision to stop eating sugar? The first 72 hours are nothing like what most people expect. And this is where the science gets genuinely fascinating. Within hours of removing sugar from your diet, your blood glucose levels begin to stabilize. The constant spikes and crashes that characterize a high-sugar lifestyle start to smooth out. This alone reduces the workload on your kidneys almost immediately, because they no longer need to go into overdrive every few hours to filter excess glucose from your blood. But the discomfort you feel during those first 3 days has nothing to do with your kidneys. Your brain is the one that complains loudly. Sugar, particularly refined sugar, triggers the release of dopamine, the same neurotransmitter associated with reward and pleasure. When you eat sugar regularly, your brain begins to expect those dopamine hits at predictable intervals. Remove the sugar, and the brain panics. Headaches emerge. Mood dips dramatically. Fatigue sets in. Irritability spikes. Some people describe the first 48 to 72 hours of cutting sugar as feeling like they have the flu. Cravings can be intense, almost irrational. People who have gone through this often describe feeling an almost overwhelming urge to eat something sweet, even when they are not hungry. This is withdrawal, not in a metaphorical sense. Neurologically and biochemically, what the brain experiences when sugar is removed mirrors, in a less intense form, what happens during withdrawal from other addictive substances. But here's the extraordinary contrast. While your brain is loudly protesting, your kidneys are quietly, immediately beginning to recover. Within the first 72 hours, the reduction in blood glucose spikes means the kidneys are no longer being pushed into hyperfiltration mode every time you eat. The pressure on the glomeruli, the tiny filtration units inside each nephron, drops noticeably. And something else begins to happen that most people have never heard of. The levels of something called advanced glycation end products, or AGE, begin to fall in your bloodstream. AGEs are toxic compounds that form when sugar molecules bond with proteins or fats in your body. They are one of the primary drivers of accelerated aging in organs, particularly the kidneys. High-sugar diets cause a buildup of AGEs in kidney tissue, which leads to stiffening, scarring, and loss of function over time. Within days of cutting sugar, the production of new AGEs slows dramatically. The kidneys begin to operate in a cleaner biochemical environment almost immediately. By the end of the first week, something else remarkable begins to happen. You start to notice changes that have nothing to do with your kidneys directly, but everything to do with what your kidneys have been quietly managing on your behalf. Many people report that they feel less bloated. Their face looks slightly less puffy. Their fingers and ankles seem less swollen. This is not a coincidence, and it is not your imagination. Here is why. When you consume large amounts of sugar, your insulin levels rise dramatically and repeatedly throughout the day. Elevated insulin signals the kidneys to retain sodium. When the kidneys hold on to sodium, water follows. The result is fluid retention throughout the body, that persistent, uncomfortable feeling of puffiness and bloat that many people on high-sugar diets experience so frequently that they have come to think of it as just how their body feels. When sugar leaves the equation, insulin levels begin to normalize. The kidneys get the signal to release the sodium they've been holding onto. And with sodium goes the excess water. Within the first week, some people lose several pounds of water weight purely as a result of this mechanism. Their blood pressure often drops noticeably too, because one of the primary drivers of high blood pressure in people who eat a lot of sugar is exactly this process of sodium retention triggered by excess insulin. The kidneys, freed from the constant demand to hold onto sodium, begin to rebalance. Blood pressure softens. The heart doesn't have to pump against as much resistance. And the blood vessels that supply the kidneys themselves begin to experience less mechanical stress. Now let's talk about something that most people associate with other causes entirely: kidney stones. If you've ever had a kidney stone, you know it is one of the most excruciating experiences a person can go through. Many people who have experienced childbirth and kidney stones will tell you the stone was worse. And if you've never had one, consider yourself fortunate, but don't assume you're safe. Because the dietary habits that most people consider harmless are silently creating the conditions for kidney stones to form right now. And sugar is one of the primary drivers that almost no one talks about. Here is the mechanism. When you consume large amounts of fructose, which is a type of sugar found in table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, fruit juices, and many processed foods, your body increases the amount of calcium, oxalate, and uric acid that it excretes in your urine. These are precisely the compounds that crystallize and form kidney stones. A study published in the Journal of Urology followed thousands of participants over several years and found that those with the highest sugar intake had a dramatically higher risk of developing kidney stones than those who consumed less. And it wasn't just soda drinkers. People who consumed seemingly healthy options like fruit juices, flavored yogurts, and packaged cereals were also at elevated risk because all of those products are loaded with added sugars that drive the same biological process. What makes this even more alarming is the recurrence rate. Once you've had one kidney stone, the likelihood of developing another within 10 years is roughly 50% if you don't change your diet. 50%. And yet most people leave the hospital with a prescription for pain medication and advice to drink more water, with no discussion of the role that sugar played in forming the stone in the first place. Within 30 days of quitting sugar, the urinary levels of calcium and oxalate begin to normalize. The conditions that allow crystals to form become less favorable, and the risk of both first-time and recurrent kidney stones drops measurably. 30 days of discipline could spare you years of recurring debilitating pain. That is not a small thing. By the second and third week of cutting sugar, something is happening inside your kidneys that is genuinely difficult to fully appreciate without understanding kidney biology. Your nephrons, those microscopic filtration units, are beginning to repair themselves. Each kidney contains roughly 1 million nephrons. They are among the most complex and specialized cells in the human body, and they have a limited but real capacity for self-repair when the conditions that were damaging them are removed. Think of it like this. Imagine a city with a major freeway that carries 10 times more traffic than it was designed for, every single hour of every single day. The roads crack, the bridges weaken. Maintenance crews can't keep up because more damage is happening faster than they can repair it. Now imagine traffic suddenly drops by 60%. The maintenance crews can finally get ahead of the damage. Cracks get filled. Weak points get reinforced. The infrastructure stabilizes. That is what happens in your kidneys when sugar leaves your diet. The reduced filtration pressure gives the nephrons the space they need to begin recovering. One of the clearest measurable signs of this recovery is a reduction in proteinuria, which is the presence of protein in the urine. Healthy kidneys filter protein and keep it in the bloodstream. Damaged kidneys leak protein into the urine. Proteinuria is one of the earliest and most reliable indicators of kidney dysfunction, and it's something that can be detected with a simple urine test. Studies have shown that reducing sugar intake leads to a measurable reduction in protein leakage within weeks. This is the filtration barrier strengthening in real time. The kidneys are healing. And that healing is happening not because of medication, not because of a surgical procedure, but because the source of the damage was removed. There is also a profound connection between sugar, diabetes, and kidney failure that cannot be overlooked. Diabetic nephropathy, which is kidney damage caused by diabetes, is the single leading cause of kidney failure in the developed world. It accounts for roughly 44% of all new cases of kidney failure. And while type 2 diabetes has multiple contributing factors, the most powerful dietary driver of the progression from normal blood sugar to prediabetes to full type 2 diabetes is chronic high sugar intake. When blood glucose is consistently elevated, it damages the blood vessels that supply the kidneys. It thickens the walls of the capillaries inside the glomeruli. It triggers inflammation and scarring throughout the kidney tissue. Over years and decades, this process leads to kidneys that can barely filter anything at all, and patients who end up on dialysis 3 times a week just to stay alive. Dialysis is not a cure. It is a substitute for what your kidneys used to do naturally, and it is a grueling, time-consuming, life-altering intervention. Patients on dialysis typically spend 3 to 5 hours, 3 days a week, connected to a machine that does what their kidneys can no longer do. It restricts what they can eat, where they can travel, how they can live, and none of that has to happen. Because the chain of events that leads to dialysis in most cases is preventable. When you cut sugar from your diet, even for 30 days, your insulin sensitivity improves measurably. Your cells become better at responding to insulin, which means your body needs to produce less of it to manage the same amount of blood glucose. This reduces the strain on the pancreas and simultaneously reduces the damage being done to the kidneys. It is a cascade of healing that begins with one simple decision. Researchers studying people with prediabetes found that even moderate reductions in added sugar intake, not complete elimination, just reduction, significantly slowed the progression toward type 2 diabetes. And for those who eliminated it entirely for an extended period, the improvements in metabolic markers were dramatic. Blood glucose stabilized. Insulin sensitivity returned closer to normal, and kidney stress markers dropped. For people who are already in the early stages of kidney disease, these changes can be the difference between stable function and progressive decline. For people who are currently healthy, they are the difference between a future with functioning kidneys and a future without. Let's talk about inflammation, because this is perhaps the most underappreciated mechanism by which sugar damages the kidneys, and the most dramatic area of recovery once sugar is removed. Chronic high blood sugar triggers a process called oxidative stress inside the kidney tissues. Free radicals, which are unstable molecules that damage cellular structures, are produced in elevated quantities when blood glucose is consistently high. This oxidative stress sparks inflammation in the kidney tissue itself, which over time leads to scarring. And once scar tissue forms in the kidney, that function is gone. Permanently. The kidney does not regenerate scar tissue back into functional nephrons. This is why prevention and early intervention are so critical. Because once significant scarring has occurred, no intervention can fully reverse it. But here is the powerful piece of this story. Within 30 days of removing sugar from your diet, inflammatory markers in the blood begin to fall. C-reactive protein, or CRP, which is one of the most reliable measures of systemic inflammation, drops measurably in people who cut added sugar. Interleukin-6, another inflammatory marker, also decreases. The oxidative stress that was damaging kidney tissues begins to subside. The inflammatory cascade that was driving scarring slows down. And the kidneys, no longer under constant biochemical attack, begin to stabilize and, in some cases, recover function that had been partially compromised. The effects of this reduction in inflammation are not limited to the kidneys. People who quit sugar for 30 days consistently report a wide range of improvements that seem unrelated to kidney health at first glance. Skin clears up. Joint pain decreases. Headaches that have been a daily companion for years begin to fade. Energy becomes more stable throughout the day, without the dramatic crashes that follow a sugar hit. Sleep often improves. Mood stabilizes. These are not separate phenomena. They are all expressions of the same underlying shift. The body's inflammatory burden is dropping, and every organ and system benefits from that. Think of chronic inflammation like rust forming on metal. You can't see it happening in real time. It forms slowly and visibly beneath the surface. But if you don't address the conditions that cause the rusting, eventually the structure weakens. And when sugar is the source of that rusting process in your body, removing it is like removing the metal from a corrosive environment. The rusting slows. What's already damaged doesn't fully reverse, but the progression stops. And the parts that were still intact have a chance to remain that way for much longer. By day 30, the changes that have occurred inside your body are not subtle. They are measurable. They are significant. And for many people, they are genuinely life-changing. Blood pressure is often lower. Protein leakage in the urine has frequently decreased. Inflammatory markers have dropped. Blood glucose has stabilized. Insulin sensitivity has improved. The kidneys are filtering more efficiently and under far less stress than they were a month ago. Some people also notice that their urine has changed in appearance, becoming clearer and less concentrated, which reflects the fact that the kidneys are no longer straining to manage the excess waste products that a high-sugar diet constantly generates. But here is perhaps the most important thing to understand about those 30 days. They are not the destination. They are a demonstration. They are proof of concept. Because 30 days of cutting sugar shows you, in your own body, with your own energy levels, and your own sense of well-being, what your kidneys are capable of when you stop working against them. And once you've experienced that, once you've felt the difference, the question changes. It's no longer, can I give up sugar for 30 days? It becomes, why would I ever go back? Long-term studies on populations who maintain consistently low added sugar diets show dramatically lower rates of chronic kidney disease, lower rates of type 2 diabetes, lower rates of cardiovascular disease, and significantly longer periods of healthy, independent functioning in later life. The science is not ambiguous on this. The relationship between chronic sugar consumption and kidney damage is not a fringe hypothesis. It is established, replicated, and supported by decades of research from institutions around the world. And the corollary is equally well established. Reducing sugar intake meaningfully reduces the risk of that damage occurring. Your kidneys have been working for you every second of every day since before you were born. They have never asked you for anything. They have never called in sick. They have never stopped filtering, never stopped protecting you from the toxins and waste products that your own metabolic processes generate. And every time you choose to reduce the amount of added sugar in your diet, you are giving them something they desperately need. A break, not a vacation, not a complete rest. Just a reduction in the relentless grinding overdrive that a high-sugar diet imposes on them every single day. The occasional sugary treat is not going to destroy your kidneys. That is not the message here. The message is this: daily, habitual, chronic excesses. The birthday cake once a month is not the problem. The soda at every meal is. The candy bar as a snack is. The flavored coffee drink every morning is. The cumulative, day-in, day-out burden of constant added sugar is what drives the silent progressive damage that ends, for too many people, in dialysis chairs and transplant waiting lists. And it doesn't have to. Moderation protects. Reduction heals. And 30 days is all the proof you need that change is not only possible, it is already happening inside you from the very first moment you make a different choice. Your kidneys have been waiting for that moment. Give it to them. Not because someone told you to, not because of a number on a scale, but because those two quiet, tireless organs have been fighting for you your entire life, and they deserve a fighting chance in return.